Scapula of ox. It is flat, triangular bone, situated on the anterolateral aspect of the thorax and directed obliquely downward and forward. The clavicle is absent. It is connected to the axial skeleton only by muscles. It has two surfaces, three borders and three angles. The lateral surface or the dorsum is wide above and narrow below. It is traversed by the scapular spine, which divides the lateral surface into an anterior supraspinous fossa and the posterior infraspinous fossa, the former being the smaller. The costal or ventral surface presents a shallow depression called subscapular fossa. It possesses three borders. The anterior border is thin, convex above and concave below. The posterior border is thick, presents the nutrient foramen in the lower third, and is rough or deltoideous, teres major and long head of triceps muscles. The vertebral border is thick, pitted and carries in life the scapular cartilage, the unossified part of the fetal scapula. The medial face of the cartilage gives attachment to the rhomboideus. It possesses three angles. The anterior or cervical angle is thin. The posterior or dorsal angle is thick. The inferior or glenoid angle carries the glenoid cavity and anterior to it the tuber scapulae. The former meets the head of the humerus to form the shoulder joint. The rim of the cavity presents the glenoid notch on the anterolateral aspect. The tuber scapula is for the biceps brachia and presents the coracoid process on its medial aspect for the coracobrachiolis. In the scapula of horse, the acromial process is absent. The subscapular fossa is deeper, and partly separates two triangular rough areas in the upper third. The glenoid notch is on the anteromedial aspect of the rim. On its posterolateral aspect the rim presents a tubercle for teres minor. The tuber scapula is larger, and placed further away from the glenoid cavity. In the pig, scapula of the pig is very wide. The scapular spine is triangular, and is very wide in its middle, which curves backward over the infraspinous fossa and bears large tuberosity. Acromion process is rudimentary. The glenoid notch is absent. The tuber scapula is above the anteromedial part of the glenoid cavity. No distinct coracoid process, and it unites with the rest of the bone at about 1 year. In dog, the clavicle, when present, is a small cartilaginous or bony plate embedded in the brachiocephalicus muscle. In the scapula, the spine is placed in the middle of the dorsum, and increases in height from above downward, to the level of the glenoid cavity, where it terminates in the acromion process. The glenoid cavity extends to the inferior face of the tuber scapula. The coracoid process is absent. Scapula of fowl has a clavicle, coracoid, and the scapula. The clavicle is a thin bent rod directed downward and backward. The flat dorsal end rests against the scapula and the coracoid to form the foramen triceum. The clavicles of two sides unite ventrally to form a flattened plate called hypocleidium, which is attached to the rostrum of the sternum by a ligament. The two combined clavicles form the furcula, and are also called wishbone. The coracoid is rod-like, directed backward, downward and inward. The upper extremity is prolonged into a hook-like process medially. It presents a small articular surface, the glenoid cavity, for articulation with humerus. Below this, there is another area for articulation with scapula. The lower extremity articulates with the sternum. The scapula is a narrow saber-shaped bone placed parallel to the vertebral column. The anterior end presents a depression laterally which forms part of the glenoid cavity for the reception of the head of the humerus, and a projection anteriorly, the acromion process, which meets the clavicle and coracoid to form the foramen triceum. The posterior end lies at the level of the sixth rib, humerus of ox. It is a long bone placed obliquely downward and backward between the shoulder joint above and the elbow joint below. It has a shaft and two extremities. The shaft has a twisted appearance, and has 4 surfaces. The anterior face is triangular, wide and smooth above, narrow and rough below. The posterior face blends with the medial and lateral faces. The medial face is nearly straight in its length. Just above its middle it presents a teres tubercle for latissimus dorsi and teres major. The lateral face is spirally curved, and forming the musculospiral groove, which contains the brachialis muscle. Lateral surface is separated from the anterior by a distinct border, the crest of humerus, which bears above its middle the deltoid tuberosity. The proximal extremity consists of a head, neck, 2 tuberosities and the intertuberal or bicipital groove. The head presents a circular articular surface, which articulates with the glenoid cavity of the scapula, to form the shoulder joint. The lateral tuberosity consists of 2 parts, an anterior summit arching medially, and a posterior convexity. The former overhangs the bicipital groove, and gives attachment to the lateral tendon of the infraspinatus. The intertuberal groove is bounded by the anterior divisions of the 2 tuberosities and in life, is covered by a fibrocartilage for the play of the tendon of origin of biceps brachii. The distal extremity has an oblique surface, which is divided by a ridge into 2 condyles, the medial being the larger. This extremity presents anteriorly above the articular area, the coronoid fossa, which receives the coronoid process of the radius in extreme flexion of the elbow joint. Behind and above the condyles are 2 thick ridges, the epicondyles. Between these 2 epicondyles is the deep olecranon fossa, which receives the anconus process of ulna during extreme extension. In the humerus of horse, the deltoid tuberosity is more prominent. The bicipital groove is divided by intermediate ridge. The summit of lateral tuberosity does not arch inward. The coronoid and the olecranon fossa are shallower. Pig humerus has the appearance of italic letter F minus the crossbar. The shaft is laterally compressed, and flat on the medial side. The musculospiral groove is shallow and the deltoid tuberosity is small, and there is a larger rounded eminence midway between it and the lateral tuberosity. Teres tubercle is absent. The condyles are of equal size. The coronoid fossa is prominent. The olecranon fossa is narrow and deep. Occasionally the subtracheal foramen is found. In dog, the musculospiral groove is shallow. The deltoid tuberosity is in the form of a low ridge. The lateral tuberosity is undivided. The coronoid and the olecranon fossa communicate with each other through the supratracheal foramen, through which no soft structure passes. In fowl, the bone is directed parallel to thoracic vertebrae when the wing is at rest. The proximal extremity presents on the medial aspect, an opening leading into the air cavity in its shaft.